Hyper Traveler. By Allan Banford. Chapter 1. The Gift. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the small town. The air was still and quiet, save for the distant sound of a rooster crowing and the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a peaceful morning, like any other. But little did the town know, this day would mark the beginning of a story that would inspire generations to come. A story of love and loss, of triumph and defeat, of joy and sorrow. A story that would be told for years, passed down from generation to generation, becoming the stuff of legend. Kamo was a small town boy. He had always dreamed of leaving the town and exploring the world beyond, but he had never dared to do so. But on this particular morning, something in Kamo's heart stirred. He felt an unexplainable urge to leave and set out on an adventure. So, he packed a small bag with a few belongings and set out on foot, not knowing where he was going or what he would find. As he walked, Kamo felt a sense of freedom and excitement he had never experienced before. The world around him seemed to open up, revealing endless possibilities and adventures. He walked for hours until he came upon a small village nestled in the mountains. In the village, Kamo met an old beard named Matthew. Matthew was a hyper traveler, a free spirit who had seen the universe and lived to tell the tales. He was everything Kamo had ever dreamed of. They spent time exploring the village and its surroundings, and as they did, they talked for hours about how to make the most of every single second, about the places Matthew had been and the places Kamo wanted to go. Kamo's restless spirit and thirst for adventure couldn't be quenched by settling down in one place. So, after a day in the village, he set out on his own again, but before he leaves Matthew gave him a magic card to fund his adventures. Kamo was speechless. He never expected anything from the old beard apart from his advice, and now he was set for life to continue looking for his purpose. He traveled for months, wandering from place to place, never staying in one spot for too long. And so began Kamo's journey, a journey that would take him to the far corners of the world and beyond. A journey that would be filled with love and loss, triumph and defeat, joy and sorrow. Chapter 2. Fear. After months of traveling, Kamo found himself in a bustling city, surrounded by people and noise. He had never seen so many people in one place before, and the noise was overwhelming. But he was determined to explore the city and see what it had to offer. He spent the first few days wandering the streets, taking in the sights and sounds. He tried new foods, visited museums, art galleries, and even went to a concert. One day, as he was walking through a crowded street, he felt a tug on his backpack. He turned around to see a young boy running away with his bag. Without thinking, Kamo chased after him, running through the streets and dodging people left and right. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kamo caught up with the boy. He was huddled in an alleyway, rifling through his bag. When he saw him, he looked up with a mixture of fear and defiance. But Kamo didn't feel angry or scared. Instead, he felt a sense of compassion for the boy. He knew what it was like to feel lost and alone in the world. Without saying a word, Kamo held out his hand, offering the boy his bag. He looked at him for a moment, then slowly handed it back to him. "Thank you," Kamo said. "Is there anything I can do to help you?" The boy hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "My sister," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's sick. We don't have any money for medicine." Kamo knew what he had to do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of bills, handing them to the boy. "Take this," he said. "It's not much, but it should help. And tell your sister I hope she feels better soon." The boy's eyes widened in shock and gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking. As Kamo walked away, he felt a sense of purpose. He realized that this was what he had been searching for all along, the ability to help others and make a difference in the world. From that day on, Kamo dedicated himself to helping those in need. He volunteered at homeless shelters, hospitals, charity organizations. As he traveled the world, Kamo found that his purpose in life was to make the world a better place, one person at a time. Chapter 3. Brave. Years went by, and Kamo continued to travel the world, helping those in need and seeking out new adventures. He had seen things that most people could only dream of, but his thirst for knowledge and exploration never waned. One day, while wandering through a remote jungle, Kamo stumbled upon a small village. The people there were unlike any he had ever met. They spoke a language he didn't understand, and their customs were vastly different from anything he had seen before. Despite the language barrier, Kamo felt drawn to the people of the village. He spent days with them, learning about their way of life and helping out with their daily tasks. But one night, as he was settling down to sleep in a small hut, he heard a commotion outside. When he stepped out, he saw that the village was under attack by a group of armed men. Without hesitation, Kamo sprang into action. He grabbed a stick and joined the villagers in their fight against the invaders. It was a fierce battle, but with Kamo's help, the villagers were able to push the attackers back. When the dust had settled, Kamo surveyed the damage. The village was in shambles, and many of the villagers had been injured. Kamo knew what he had to do. He set to work, using his knowledge of medicine and his experience volunteering in hospitals to tend to the wounded. He worked tirelessly for days, refusing to rest until everyone was healthy and safe. When he had done all he could for the village, Kamo said his goodbyes and continued on his journey. But he knew that he would never forget the people he had met in that small jungle village. They had shown him what it truly meant to be brave and selfless, and he knew that they would always hold a special place in his heart. As Kamo traveled on, he found that his experiences in the jungle had changed him. He had always been driven by a desire to help others, but now he felt an even deeper sense of purpose. He realized that the world was a vast and complex place, full of people and cultures that he had yet to discover. And so, he set out once again, eager to see what adventures lay ahead and what new lessons he could learn. Chapter 4. Study. Kamo's travels eventually took him to a remote island in the middle of the ocean. The island was unlike any he had ever seen. It was lush and tropical, with crystal-clear waters and white sand beaches. But as Kamo explored the island, he began to notice something strange. The locals seemed to be afraid of something, and they whispered about a curse that had befallen their village. Curiosity piqued, Kamo set out to discover the source of the curse. He soon found out that a nearby volcano had erupted years ago, destroying much of the island and leaving it uninhabitable. The locals had tried to rebuild, but every time they did, their homes were destroyed by mysterious, powerful waves that swept over the island. Determined to help, Kamo set to work studying the island's geography and weather patterns. He discovered that the waves were caused by a phenomenon known as a tsunami, a massive ocean wave created by seismic activity deep beneath the Earth's surface. With this knowledge, Kamo set out to find a solution. He worked with the locals to build a system of warning sirens and evacuation routes, and taught them how to recognize the signs of an impending tsunami. And when the next tsunami hit, Kamo was ready. The sirens sounded, and the villagers fled to higher ground, escaping the devastating wave. Thanks to Kamo's efforts, the village was able to rebuild and thrive, free from the threat of the curse that had once haunted them. Kamo knew that his journey was far from over. He had seen so much of the world, but there were still so many places left to explore, and so many people left to help. And so, he set out once again, eager to see what new adventures lay ahead. Chapter 5. Equality. As Kamo traveled further, he found himself in a bustling city, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and endless crowds of people. It was a far cry from the remote villages and tropical islands he had become accustomed to, but Kamo was excited to explore this new world. As he walked through the city streets, Kamo was struck by the stark contrast between the rich and poor. In some parts of the city, luxury cars and designer shops abounded, while in others, homeless people begged for spare change and slept in the streets. Kamo couldn't ignore the suffering he saw around him, and he set out to help in any way he could. He volunteered at soup kitchens and homeless shelters and spent time talking to people on the streets, listening to their stories and offering them comfort. But Kamo knew that this was only a temporary solution. He wanted to help these people in a more meaningful way, to give them the tools they needed to lift themselves out of poverty. And so, he began to research about economic and social policies that could help address the root causes of poverty. He worked tirelessly, writing papers and giving presentations to politicians and community leaders, urging them to take action. At first, progress was slow. But Kamo refused to give up. He rallied support from like-minded individuals, and eventually, his efforts paid off. The city began implementing policies that addressed poverty and inequality, and the lives of the people around Kamo began to improve. As he looked out over the city, Kamo felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had made a difference in the lives of so many people and had helped to create a more just and equitable society. But even as he celebrated this victory, Kamo knew that there was still much work to be done. The world was vast and complex, and there were always new challenges to face and new people to help. Chapter 6. Innovate. Kamo's travels eventually led him to a small, rural village nestled in the mountains. The village was home to a tight-knit community of farmers who worked hard to eke out a living from the land. As Kamo explored the village, he noticed that the people seemed to be struggling. The crops were failing, and the villagers were becoming increasingly desperate. Determined to help, Kamo set out to learn more about the village's farming practices. He spoke with the farmers and learned that they were still using traditional methods that had been passed down for generations. But as Kamo studied the land and the crops, he realized that these methods were no longer sustainable. The soil was depleted, and the crops were vulnerable to pests and disease. Kamo knew that he needed to find a solution, so he began to research new farming techniques. He learned about sustainable agriculture and experimented with new methods like crop rotation and companion planting. At first, the villagers were skeptical. They were used to their traditional ways and were hesitant to try something new. But Kamo persisted, and slowly but surely, the villagers began to see the benefits of his methods. The crops began to thrive, and the villagers no longer had to worry about going hungry. They even had enough left over to sell at the market, bringing in extra income for the village. As he looked out over the lush fields and smiling faces of the villagers, Kamo felt a sense of deep satisfaction. He had helped to improve the lives of these people and had found a way to create a sustainable future for them. But Kamo knew that there were still so many people in the world who were struggling, and so many problems that needed to be solved. Chapter 7. Sustainability. As Kamo continued his travels, he found himself in a bustling metropolis unlike any he had ever seen. The city was a center of commerce and industry, with towering skyscrapers and a constant hum of activity. But as he explored the city, Kamo couldn't help but notice the toll that this activity was taking on the environment. The air was thick with pollution, and the streets were choked with traffic. Determined to make a difference, Kamo set out to find a way to promote sustainability in the city. He researched new technologies and strategies for reducing emissions and waste and worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the importance of protecting the environment. At first, progress was slow. Many of the city's leaders were more concerned with profits than with sustainability, and they were resistant to change. But Kamo refused to give up. He rallied support from environmental activists, business leaders, and concerned citizens, and eventually, his efforts paid off. The city began implementing new policies to promote sustainability, from incentivizing green business practices to investing in public transportation. As he watched the city transform, Kamo felt a sense of deep satisfaction. He had helped to create a more sustainable future for the people who lived there and had shown that it was possible to balance economic growth with environmental protection. But Kamo knew that there were still many challenges ahead. The world was changing rapidly, and there were always new problems to be solved. Chapter 8. Discovery. Kamo found himself in a small, remote village amid a vast desert. The landscape was barren and unforgiving, with scorching temperatures and dunes that stretched as far as the eye could see. The people of the village were nomads, traveling from place to place in search of water and sustenance. Kamo was fascinated by their way of life and spent weeks learning about their culture and customs. But as he spent more time with the villagers, Kamo began to notice that they were facing a grave threat. The desert was growing hotter and more inhospitable every year, and water was becoming increasingly scarce. Determined to help, Kamo set out to find a way to bring sustainable agriculture to the desert. He researched new methods for conserving water and soil and experimented with different crops that could survive in harsh conditions. At first, the villagers were skeptical. They had lived their entire lives in the desert and were accustomed to the hardships that came with it. But Kamo persisted, and slowly but surely, the villagers began to see the benefits of his methods. As the village began to thrive, Kamo felt a sense of deep satisfaction. He had helped to improve the lives of these people and had found a way to create a sustainable future for them amid the harsh desert environment. Months went by, and Kamo continued his work in the village. He became a beloved member of the community and was even offered a place to live among them. But one day, while Kamo was out exploring the desert, he stumbled upon something unexpected. Buried beneath the sand was an ancient artifact, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The artifact was a small, intricately carved stone, with markings that Kamo couldn't decipher but saw before on Matthew's jumper. But as he held it in his hand, he felt a strange energy coursing through his body. Kamo knew that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could change the course of human history. He vowed to unravel the mystery of the artifact and set out on a new quest to uncover its secrets. As he traveled from village to village, Kamo met other adventurers and scholars who were also intrigued by the artifact. They pieced together clues and deciphered the markings on the stone. What they discovered was nothing short of astonishing. The artifact was a key that could unlock the secrets of a lost civilization, one that had thrived in the desert thousands of years ago. With the help of his newfound allies, Kamo journeyed deep into the heart of the desert, to a hidden city that had long been forgotten by the rest of the world. There, he discovered a thriving metropolis filled with advanced technology and knowledge that had been lost to humanity for centuries. The city had been abandoned, the people who once lived there were long gone, but their legacy lived on. Kamo realized that his journey had been leading him here all along. He had been chosen to uncover the secrets of this lost civilization, to bring their knowledge back to the world and help humanity take a giant leap forward. And so, Kamo set to work. He spent years studying the technology and knowledge of the lost civilization and developed innovations that would revolutionize the world. His work brought him fame and fortune, but Kamo never forgot the people of the desert village who had first welcomed him with open arms. He used his newfound power and influence to improve their lives even further and to spread the knowledge and technology of the lost civilization to those who needed it most. In the end, Kamo realized that his journey had been more than just a series of adventures. It had been a calling, a purpose that had been waiting for him all along. And as he looked back on his life, he knew that he had played a small but important part in. Chapter 9. Unexpected. Kamo had spent years studying the technology and knowledge of the lost civilization and had made incredible advancements that had revolutionized the world. He had become a renowned scientist and inventor, with people from all over the world seeking his expertise and guidance. But one day, Kamo received a mysterious message from an unknown sender. The message contained a cryptic invitation to a secret meeting, one that promised to reveal a groundbreaking discovery. Curious and intrigued, Kamo followed the instructions in the message and arrived at a hidden location, deep in the heart of a dense forest. There, he met two hyper-travelers, Smilo and Shlipo. They were led by a mysterious figure, whose identity was concealed behind a hooded cloak. The figure revealed himself, and it was the old beard Matthew. He was the lead member of the Founders Society, that had existed for centuries, dedicated to uncovering the secrets about the lost civilizations in all the universes, including the one Kamo had spent his life studying. The society had recently made a discovery, one that had the potential to change everything. They had found a way to travel back in time, to the very moment when the lost civilization was thriving. Kamo was skeptical at first, but Matthew presented the evidence. He could not deny the possibility of this discovery. The society had built a time machine, one that could transport a person back in time for a limited amount of time, and Kamo was invited to be the first to test it. Despite the risks and dangers, Kamo could not resist the opportunity to witness the lost civilization firsthand. He agreed to travel back in time, with the hope of uncovering even more secrets about this ancient civilization. As he stepped into the time machine, Kamo felt a rush of adrenaline and excitement. The machine hummed to life, and he was transported back in time, to a bustling city filled with people and activity. Kamo could hardly believe his eyes. He was standing amid the lost civilization, surrounded by the very people he had spent his life studying. But as he explored the city, Kamo realized that something was amiss. The people were behaving strangely, and there was an air of tension and unease in the air. He soon discovered the reason for this. The city was under attack by an unknown enemy that had emerged from the shadows. Kamo watched in horror as the city was destroyed, and the people he had grown to admire were slaughtered and reduced. At that moment, Kamo realized that his journey had taken a dark turn. He had been lured into a trap, one that had been orchestrated by the very society that had invited him to travel back in time. Kamo realized too late that society's true goal was not to uncover the secrets of the lost civilization but to eliminate the timeline for their benefit. He was trapped in the past, with no way to return to his own time. But Kamo refused to give up. He used his knowledge and expertise to build new inventions and to protect himself from the dangers of the past. As years went by, Kamo became a legend in his own right, revered by the people of the lost civilization as a powerful and wise sorceress. He used his position to protect the people and fight against the society that had trapped him in the past. But even as he fought for justice and freedom, Kamo knew that he may never be able to return to his own time. He was resigned to living out the rest of his days in the past, a prisoner of his own journey. And so, Kamo continued to live in the past, determined to make a difference in a world that was not his own. He had been betrayed and trapped, but he refused to give up on his quest for knowledge and adventure. His journey had taken an unexpected turn, but he would continue to forge his own. Chapter 10. Awakening. Kamo had spent years living in the past, fighting for justice and protecting the people of the lost civilization. He had become a powerful figure, feared by his enemies and loved by his allies. But despite his success, Kamo still yearned to return to his own time. He had been trapped in the past for so long. One day, Kamo received an unexpected visitor. It was Smilo, who he met at the hyper-travelers' reunion. Smilo explained that he had been sent back in time to retrieve Kamo, to bring him back to his own time. Kamo was hesitant at first, unsure if he could trust this stranger. But as Smilo revealed more about his mission, Kamo began to see the opportunity to finally return to his own time. He agreed to go with the Smilo, eager to see what the future held. As they traveled through time, Kamo was amazed by the sights and sounds of the future. The world had changed so much since he had been trapped in the past, and he struggled to comprehend the advancements and developments that had taken place. But as he explored the future, Kamo soon realized that something was amiss. The world was not as perfect as it seemed. There was still corruption and injustice, and the people were struggling to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. Kamo was determined to make a difference, just as he had done in the past. He used his knowledge and expertise to invent new technologies and to fight against the injustices of the future. But as he delved deeper into the world of the future, Kamo discovered a dark secret. Smilo, who had brought him to the future, was not who he seemed. He was a member of a society, one that was dedicated to manipulating the timeline for their benefit. Kamo had been betrayed once again, and he was trapped in the future, just as he had been trapped in the past. But this time, he was not alone. He had new allies, and together they fought against society, determined to restore balance to the timeline. As they battled against their enemies, Kamo began to uncover the truth about society. He realized that they were not just manipulating the timeline, but they were attempting to rewrite history altogether. Kamo knew that he had to stop them, no matter the cost. He risked everything to gather the information he needed to dismantle society once and for all. In the end, Kamo emerged victorious. He had saved the future and restored balance to the timeline. But as he returned to his own time, Kamo knew that he had been forever changed by his journey. He had traveled through time, battled against enemies, and uncovered secrets that no one else had ever known. He had been betrayed and trapped, but he had also found new allies and a new purpose. Kamo had lived a life full of adventure and danger, and he had emerged stronger for it. His journey had taken unexpected twists and turns, but he had faced them all with courage and determination. He was a true hero, a time traveler, and a force to be reckoned with. Chapter 11. LA. Kamo had returned to his own time, but he was not the same person he had been before. His journey through time had changed him in ways he could never have imagined. He had seen the world in all its beauty and all its darkness, and he had come to understand the fragility of time itself. As he emerged from the time portal, Kamo found himself in an almost unrecognizable world. The city had grown and changed in ways that he had never seen before. The buildings were taller, the streets were busier, and the people were more diverse than ever. Kamo was filled with a sense of wonder and awe as he walked through the city, taking in all the sights and sounds around him. He marveled at the futuristic technology that was now a part of everyday life, from flying cars to holographic displays. But as he explored the city, Kamo also came to understand that not everything was as it seemed. There were still inequalities and injustices that plagued the world even in this advanced future. He saw poverty and hardship alongside the gleaming towers of the wealthy. Despite these challenges, Kamo remained determined to make a difference. He knew that he had a role to play in shaping the future, just as he had done in the past. He spent his days working on new inventions and ideas, trying to make the world a better place. But as he worked, Kamo began to notice strange occurrences. Time seemed to be behaving erratically, with sudden shifts and changes that no one could explain. Kamo realized that something was seriously wrong with the timeline, and he set out to discover the cause. His investigations led him to a shadowy organization that was manipulating time for its benefit. The group, known as the Chronos Syndicate, had been using time travel technology to manipulate events throughout history, to amass wealth and power. Kamo knew that he had to stop them. With the help of Schliepo, the other hyper-traveler, that meet and the reunion that it was locked in the timeline as well, he embarked on a dangerous mission to dismantle the syndicate and restore balance to the timeline. Their journey took them across time and space, as they battled against the syndicate's agents and attempted to unravel the complex web of time manipulation that they had woven. Along the way, Kamo discovered a shocking truth: the syndicate was not the only group that was manipulating time. There were other factions, each with their agenda, each attempting to control the flow of time for their benefit. Kamo realized that the entire fabric of time itself was at risk. If these groups continued to manipulate the timeline, the consequences could be catastrophic. But even as he faced this daunting challenge, Kamo was also presented with an unexpected opportunity. He discovered a way to harness the power of time itself, to shape events and influence the course of history in a way that no one had ever done before. Kamo knew that this power was dangerous and could easily be misused. But he also saw the potential for good, the chance to make a real difference in the world. Kamo knew that he was the only one who could wield this power wisely. He made a solemn vow to use it for the greater good, to protect the timeline and ensure that history unfolded as it was meant to. And so, Kamo embarked on a new journey, one that would take him to the very limits of time and space. He would fight against those who would manipulate time for their benefit, and he would work tirelessly to shape a better future for all of humanity. His journey would be filled with unexpected twists and turns, and he would face challenges that would test his courage. But Kamo was determined to succeed, no matter the cost. He was a hyper-traveler, a hero, and a force. Chapter 12. A Hero's Legacy. Kamo had spent years battling against the forces that sought to manipulate time. He had seen the best and worst of humanity throughout history, and he had come to understand the true power of time itself. But even with all his knowledge and experience, Kamo could not have prepared himself for what was to come. As he was working with Schliepo on a new invention, he suddenly felt a strange sensation. It was as if the entire fabric of time and space was being ripped apart. Kamo rushed to the window and looked out at the city. To his horror, he saw that the world outside was twisting and distorting as if it was being sucked into a black hole. He knew that this was no ordinary event. Something had gone wrong with time, and it was up to him to fix it. Kamo and Schliepo jumped on it and took them across time and space, as they battled against the forces that sought to prevent them from discovering the truth. Finally, after months of traveling, they found the source of the disturbance inside the black hole. It was a massive device manipulated by Matthew and Smilo that was tearing apart the foundations of time itself. Kamo and Schliepo knew that they had to act fast. They scrambled to build a device of their own, one that could counteract the effects of the device and restore order to the timeline. Their efforts paid off, and they were able to stabilize the timeline, preventing it from tearing apart completely. But as Kamo watched the device disappear into nothingness, he knew that he has to help Matthew and Smilo, otherwise the world would never be the same. The effects of the disturbance had left their mark on the timeline, altering events and changing the course of history. Kamo knew that he would spend the rest of his life working to repair the damage that had been done, but will never forget himself to see such a great minds to disappear. While he was thinking about this, Schlipo already saved them. Kamo felt a sense of hope again. He knew that, no matter what the future held, he had the power to shape it for the better. And so, Kamo continued his work with Schlipo, Matthew, and Smilo, developing new inventions and technologies that would help to shape the course of history. He worked tirelessly, day and night, never resting until he was certain that the world was safe. As the years went by, Kamo's legend grew. He became known as the greatest hyper-traveler in history, a hero who had saved the world from destruction time and time again. And in the end, Kamo knew that his journey through time had been worth it. He had seen the best and worst of humanity, but he had never given up hope. He had fought against the forces of darkness, and he had emerged victorious. And as he lay down to rest, Kamo knew that he had done everything in his power to ensure that the future was bright. For as long as there were people like him, willing to fight for what was right, there would always be hope for a better tomorrow.